Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Local Government Pension Scheme Pensions Board, which is being held electronically in public. I've got an announcement I just need to make prior to the meeting to establish the rationale for holding this meeting in this way. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, the Council will be holding this meeting electronically in accordance with the relevant regulations. Members of the public may also attend this meeting in an electronic capacity, and there is a link on the Council's website for them to do so. Members of the meeting are asked to keep their microphones and cameras switched off until called to speak, and to switch their microphone and cameras off once they've finished speaking. To indicate a wish to speak, members should request to do so using the meeting's chat function, which we will monitor. At the end of the debate on each item of business, there will be a vote. Members should vote using the chat function by indicating for, against or abstain, and we'll declare the result after each vote. Now, I appreciate most of the items on this agenda are for noting, but for the record, we do need members just to indicate they've noted the item at the end of that particular item. We have officers supporting us and are in attendance, but will keep their cameras and microphones switched off unless called to speak. Now, there's quite a bit of business on the agenda this morning. I would like to complete by midday if possible. So I would ask officers to be fairly succinct when you introduce the item and take the item as read by members of the committee. So there's plenty of time for questions and comment. So to start the meeting, the part one item of the meeting, I have items under membership changes. First of all, I have an apology from Terry Hone as a substitute member for the employer side. I'd like to welcome James Kidd to the board, who is a new employer representative standing substitute for the police. And now I'm going to ask members present if they would actually just introduce themselves for the benefit of anyone who is actually listening or attending the meeting from the public. And I'll just read out the names and people perhaps can just introduce themselves. First of all, my name is Derek Ashley. I'm a county councillor and I'm the employer representative and current chairman of the pension scheme board. Moving on, then, can I ask Sarah Ansell to introduce herself?
Hello, yes, I'm Sarah Ansell and I'm an employer representative at the University of Hertfordshire.
Thank you. Graham Clay?
Graham Clay, I'm an employer representative nominated by the schools and academies.
Thank you very much. Employer representative standing substitute, James Kidd.
Hi there, I'm James Kidd. I'm the Chief Accountant at Hertfordshire Constabulary, and as Derek mentioned, it's my first meeting today.
And welcome. And Rob McCarthy.
Hi there. Yes, I'm Rob McCarthy, Chairman of the Hertfordshire Association of Parish and Town Councils. I'm also a parish councillor myself. Thank you
very much. Now that's the employer side. Moving on to the member side. First of all, Mike Collier.
Hi, I'm Mike Collier, member representative and currently vice chairman of the board.
Thank you. Gail Johnson.
Hello, yes, Gail Johnson. I am a retired member representative.
Thank you very much. Kevin O'Daly. Is Kevin with us? Oh, he sent apologies. Okay, thank you. Monica Patel.
Hi, I'm a member representative as well. I work at the Hertfordshire County Council as a senior commercial solicitor.
Thank you very much, Monica. And then we've got the member representative standing substitutes. David Gooden. Is he with us?
Hello.
Thank you, David.
Hello, David Gooden, Herts County Council employee, substitute member.
Thank you very much. And finally, Tim Perkins.
Thank you, Chairman. Tim Perkins, Clerk to Abertraney Parish Council, standing member staff, currently employed by the Parish Council, but hope to be retired member fairly soon when my wife can get parole from the NHS.
Okay, thank you very much, Tim. Thank you. And thank you for everybody for introducing themselves. Now, just to start the meeting proper, do any members wish to declare any pecuniary or declarable interests? Okay, we'll move on to item 1, which is the minutes of the meeting of the 16th of March. Just to if members can indicate in the chat whether they agree the minutes, but I have got Gail who wishes to speak and raise a point, I think on 7.6, Gail.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just a little uncomfortable with 7.6. I'm not convinced that we observed that. I think that we were told that. It doesn't chime with 6.4, which says that a 20% drop in equity values could be a trigger point for reviewing employer contributions. I think we probably should say was not likely to be a long-term impediment or something like that. I don't think we would have said it was a minor impediment at 20%.
Okay, thank you for raising that, Gail. Can I turn to officers for some thoughts on that?
So, Matt, do you want to comment on that, as I wasn't present at the last meeting?
I think that's a fair reflection, Gail, of the discussions, definitely. So I'd be happy for those minutes to be amended. All
right. OK, thank you, Gail. So we'll make the necessary amendment. Thank you very much indeed for raising that.
Thank you.
Raising that, Gail. Otherwise, are we all content with the minutes? If you can just put content in the meeting chat, that would be helpful. Just for the record, thank you very much. Okay. All right, thank you very much, colleagues. Item 2, Pension Fund Annual Report and Statement of Accounts. And this is being presented by Lpp Prasad, Senior Accountant. Over to you, Philip.
Thank you very much. So the purpose of this report is to provide the Pension Board with the unaudited annual report and statement of accounts for 1920, which can be found in Appendix A. The main summary points are as followed. As the pension fund audit is not completed, there is no audit results report to bring to board. We are hopeful that the accounts will be concluded by the end of September and the audit results will be brought to the Pension Committee and Pension Board at the next meetings once they've been signed off by Audit Committee on the 15th of October. Due to COVID-19, the deadline for the sign-off was moved to the 30th of November, so we are within the deadline for completion. However, we are conscious of the impact this has had on districts and borough councils, in addition to the county council's own accounts. The overall fund value fell by 29.1 million from the prior year, mainly due to the impact of COVID-19. The overall investment return for the year was negative 1.5%, excess of the benchmark negative 3.9%. During the external audit review of the annual report and accounts, one spelling mistake was discovered and amended. Although the audit has not concluded, pension fund officers are aware of 2 items which will be presented in the audit report. Section 4 goes into the statement of accounts. A few of the main points are 4.7, which discusses the increase in management expense. While this is mainly due to an increase in investment manager fee, it also includes the increased costs from hirements and LPP associated with the triennial valuation year. 4.9 explains the change in value of investments between 1819 and 1920. From initial positive result in Q1 to 3 in 1920, Q4 resulted in a negative 8.1% net return of from COVID-19, with an overall loss of 100.2 million in 1920. 4.11 discusses the transfer of the RLAM mandates to the access pool. Due to the asset category being the same post-transfer, readers of the accounts will not see the transfer identified in the transfer to other categories in note 6.7 of the accounts. Section 5 looks at the annual report and outlines more information about the management of the fund. And lastly, section 6 goes into the 2 items which will be identified in the audit report. As this was discussed at the Pension Board training, I won't go into further detail here. The Pension Board is asked to note and comment on the unaudited annual report and statement of accounts for 1920.
Thank you very much, Philip. Now, I'm open to contributions from members of the committee. And Mike, you're first.
Hi, yeah, sorry. Minor point, but the last sentence of para 2.1 only acknowledges the impact on the district, borough councils and the county. I think we should acknowledge there are other bodies that this will have an impact upon. One of my former employers, the police, being one of them, but I'm sure it has an impact on many others as well. Okay, seems a fair point, Philip.
Yep, we can amend that to say it has impacted. I think we only chose the boroughs and HCC, as most of those have 31st of March 2020 year ends, and of course not all employers of the fund have that.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks very much. Does anyone else want to make any contributions or comments on this particular item? As I say, we did have a training session on this a bit earlier on, but I'm happy to take further contributions during the meeting proper now. Okay, I've seen no indications in chat, so I'd be grateful, colleagues, if you would we could vote on the recommendation, which we're asked to note and comment on the unaudited annual report and statements of account. So if you can put noted in the chat column, just for the record, that would be helpful, please. Sorry, just hold there a minute. I've got okay, fine, that's okay. Sally, did you want to make a comment, or you just noting? Okay, fair enough. Patrick, did you want to say something?
Yes, Chairman. I think the auditors are with us at this meeting, and I just invite them to comment on the stage of the audit, and do they anticipate completing the audit by the end of this calendar month? Okay, all right. Proceed then. Who will be speaking?
Hi there. So I'm Natalie Clark. I'm the External Audit Manager for Ernst & Young. So just to sort of confirm and alongside what Philip said, so we're substantially completing our audit. We're just finalising a few matters in relation primarily to pooled property investments, where there was a change in categorisation related to that sort of selection of assets and the testing that sits alongside that. We're concluding our procedures in respect of the triennial review work, and yeah, hopefully within the next week and a half, we're hoping to substantially complete all of that and then feed into the reporting timetable of the rest of the main county council audit.
All right, thank you very much for that, that confirmation. Anyway, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for being here today, at least electronically. All right, let's move on to item 3, Pension Fund Governance and Risk Management Report. There is an email associated with this which has been sent out, just correcting one of the charts or tables. I trust everyone has received that, but it may be referred to in Anne's report. So, Anne, do you want to, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. This is the Governance and Risk Report for April to June 2020. Alongside the fund valuation, fund officers had updated the risk register, which was reviewed by the Council's corporate risk officers, the fund actuary and investment consultants. This will be presented in the next paper. In section 4.2, we have analysed the scheme employers by risk categories. Red risk-rated employers decreased by 3 in the quarter, with a breakdown of the ongoing deficit position detailed below. The number of employers being monitored under each risk category is outlined in Appendix A. The admission agreement policy was approved by committee in July last year, and we have had very positive results. Since implementing the policy, the number of outstanding admission agreements has halved in the year, and this is because of increased interaction with employers and prompt queries and comments being received. In the past few months of lockdown, there's been a delay in receiving signed documents from 7 of our employers. Therefore, we expect to see a continued decrease in outstanding admission agreements next quarter. The number of months each admission agreement has remained outstanding is detailed further in Appendix C. The Performance Monitor in Appendix B highlights the completion of the interim audit in March and the status of the year-end audit, with expected completion date before the deadline. LPP's performance against the service level agreement continues to exceed the 95% target, and fund officers will continue working with the LPP officers to ensure that performance is continually improved. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Right, thank you very much, and we're moving in the right direction, it would appear. So I'm happy to take comments and questions from members, so please just indicate in chat if you want to raise anything or make any comments. Mike Collier, question?
Hi, yes. A couple of bites at the cherry, if I may. First, on Agenda Pack 130, Item 8, where there's a item that says that changes in payroll of more than 10% are monitored annually to see if there's any risk of worsening. If they are identified as being at risk, do we then move them to a quarterly monitoring?
Yes, this is something that we can do. At current, they are just monitored on our employer risk monitor, and the LPP work with them to identify whether they will be ceasing in any time soon, because that's the indicator that's what helps us to indicate whether the employer may be ceasing soon.
I'm just concerned that if we get a flag that there's a possibility to wait another year, I think it could be too late.
Okay, I think we can increase monitoring to quarterly in that respect. Yeah.
So you'll take that on board, Anne, will you?
Yes, thank you.
And my other question is, it's Agenda Pack page 135. I appreciate a lot of work goes on in trying to clear the outstanding admission agreements, but it's worrying that the top one there, line 1, is over 2.5 years old. And I just want to know what else can be done to try and resolve that.
Yes, this particular admission agreement is very near completion. However, the academies were closed due to lockdown, and that is what prevented us from receiving the signed agreements. So all of these employers were heading in the right direction, but for the academies, unfortunately, we experienced that delay.
Right. I appreciate that, Mark. I mean, my only comment there is, well, lockdown hasn't been going for 2.5 years, but I'll trust that you'll be on their case.
Patrick, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, so I would, Chairman. Thank you. Last year, the Pensions Committee, with the help of the Pensions Board, approved a new policy to deal with legacy admission agreements. And as part of that policy, where we feel that a contractor and an outsourcing body are not concluding admission agreements effectively within a specific period of time, we will write to those two bodies, give them 3 months to complete the admission agreement, and if they don't, we will then write to all the members affected by this and inform them that they will become deferred members until an admission agreement is in place. So this tool has given us a lot of leverage in dealing with some of these legacy agreements, and as Anne has mentioned, we have cleared up quite a substantial piece of work with regard to those outstanding agreements, and that's all credit down to committee and board for endorsing and approving a policy which has worked very well for us.
All right, thank you very much, Patrick. I've got a couple of contributions. James Kidd, followed by Graham Clay. James.
Yeah, just to note and to thank officers really, because as Patrick mentioned, there has been a long-standing issue for the fund, the outstanding admission agreements, and it's definitely going in the right direction. Just curious to follow up on what Patrick's just said. Have any of the members been written to tell them that they are being made deferred, or has that been held off because of the current situation?
Patrick?
Can I comment in this one, please?
Yeah, come on. Yeah, sorry, yes, fine.
Thank you. At current, no employers have been written to. All of our employers that have outstanding admission agreements have signed the policy, which states that they have a clear intention of joining the fund. At current, those employers that have exceeded the 3 months are the academies, are the admission bodies which have academies as their scheme employer and have been out of the academies due to the lockdown. Therefore, we have extended the grace period.
Okay, James, you want to come back? You happy with that?
No, happy with that, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Graham?
Sorry, just getting the microphone back. On the chart, it says the action plan is awaiting receipt of a signed bond or admission agreement. Is this merely waiting for a wet signature, which is a term I picked up somewhere else? And if so, why? Huge commercial deals are dealt with electronically. Why can't the county?
Yes, you are right. According to our legal team, our lawyer has expressed that the council can only accept wet signatures. At current, we do not accept electronic signatures. I can inquire further as to whether we can begin to accept electronic signatures.
Well, I think it's a good idea considering how long this is likely to be going on.
I entirely agree, sir.
I mean, okay. I mean, this may well be an issue for other areas of the council anyway, I would guess. So I don't know, Patrick, whether this is a problem elsewhere. Do you know?
I was going to invite Monica, one of the member reps, to comment on that, as she's one of our internal lawyers, and she can explain the wet signature.
Okay, Monica.
Hi. Yes, I did raise my hand.
Yeah, you did. Sorry.
There's several reasons why the council can't. Firstly, admission agreements and bonds are sealed as opposed to signed, and therefore they require the official seal, the red seal of the council. Yeah. That can't be done electronically. And secondly, I think the council is trying to move to an electronic seal. It's at the moment doing electronic signing of documents, but admission agreements and bonds will down the line be moving towards electronic. We're just some way off having the technology to be able to do that. I don't think a huge amount of time, but there is some time. The second reason is it does, in the council's constitution, the way that it signs and seals documents and what documents are signed and sealed is set out in the constitution, and it requires an amendment to that. So there is a process that needs to happen before we can have electronic sealing.
Okay, right. And is that underway at all, or being looked at?
It was being looked at sort of earlier on in the year, towards the end of last year. I'm not sure where it's gone with all the recent COVID stuff, but it's something that we can look at again.
So presumably, I'm not being sort of facetious, presumably there must be some way we can sign and seal at a suitably socially distanced case. I mean,
Yes, sealing is still happening in the team. Part of the problem with bonds in particular, as opposed to admission agreements, is the time it takes for banks to come back and to give their authorisation on documents. There's just, for some reason, a huge amount of time that banks take to come back once everything is agreed, and then getting them to sign it.
Yeah.
And that is generally the problem. It can take a year and a half for sometimes the banks to come back fully.
Right. All right. Anyway, okay. So we're on the case, but we trying to overcome these difficulties. Gail, you got a question? Page 131.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. I think this is just returning to a point that I've made before, which is the employers who have a funding level below 80% but are still in the green category. I understand district councils have tax raising powers to use in the last resort, but could I just be reminded about the status of academies, why we think they have a strong employer covenant? Does the Department of Education sit behind them directly?
Anne?
Thank you. Yes, that's right. Academies are seen as green weighted employers because the DOV is sitting behind them. They are also pooled together as part of an academies pool. So if there is any additional liabilities, it's spread across all of the academies.
That's fine. Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
All right. Yes. Yes, they're not allowed to go bust, are they, basically? So, right. And thank you very much indeed. I don't see any other indications for anybody who wishes to speak. So I'd be grateful if members could just indicate noted in the chat column for this particular item. Thank you. Thank you very much, members. We move on to item 4, the risk register. This is you again, Anne.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. This is the risk register report, which details the changes that we have made to the pension fund risk register in order to address emerging risks in the LGPS. Over the past year, there's been an increased activity in the LGPS as a result of consultations on proposed regulations, continued conversation about ESG and responsible investment, and an increased awareness of cybersecurity and fraud. As a result, pension fund officers performed a thorough review of the risk register to ensure that it was robust and addresses the associated risks in these areas. Following our amendments, the risk register was reviewed by the corporate risk officers of the council, the fund actuary, and the investment consultants. The fund has mirrored the council's risk scoring approach, and the officers scored these risks individually. Current risk scores has been reviewed in further detail by the actuary and our investment consultants, and are subject to change in the next quarters. Details of the fund's approach to risk and risk scoring will be outlined in the risk management policy, which will be presented to the board at a later date. The emergence of COVID-19 occurred after the fund's review of the risk register. However, we're pleased to note that control mechanisms that we have in place have been effective. We've developed a COVID-19 policy, which will be presented in another paper to heighten the current mechanisms that we have in place. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Right, thank you very much, Anne. Now open to questions and comment from members. Can I make just one quick comment on this? I just beg the question slightly whether the rating under cybercrime is actually high enough. Can you sort of respond to that?
Yes, we are working with the LPP to understand their controls in place that they have in regards to cybersecurity and cybercrime, as this is a new area for us. So would it be possible if I can please get back to you at the next the next board to probably discuss further how the LPP are addressing cybercrime?
Yeah, that'd be very helpful, actually. Yes, that would be helpful because it's obviously very, very high profile, and of course has affected some very large organisations. Graham, you got a query page 145.
Sorry, I'm struggling to get the mechanics working.
We can hear you anyway.
Right, I think I've probably got a picture too, although Anne's showing on my screen.
Yes.
Much better picture. The chart, as I can read it, shows 3 green categories. The notes that follow show more greens, and some of the ambers have converted, I think. Is this a work in progress? And this was the chart is the start position. Further review has led to the change of some of those ambers to green.
Anne?
Yes, you are correct, Graham. Patrick and I performed a thorough review after the of these risks, and this led to the subsequent change in some of these colours. This will be presented further. This will be detailed further at the next board meeting.
The other thing is, as a general picture, it all looks rather uninformative. Almost everything started out at the same risk level. So are the subdivisions red, green, amber appropriately divided, if you like? Question for further review, perhaps.
Although we do have red, green and amber, the risk scores are detailed further in the current risk detail section. So the scoring of each of these risks have been detailed in these aspects, whereas some, for example, sub-risk 4 is on the lower end of amber, but there are other risks which are on the higher end of the amber. This is how we can differentiate the scoring of each of these risks.
That's where the semicircle with 3 background colours and an arrow on it enables you to indicate whereabouts in the sector you are. And that might be more informative as a summary than this box presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. Patrick, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I suggested that to my officers that we took the risk register out of the previous report. We used to incorporate this risk register within the report that you just heard previously from Anne, and because I felt it was buried in the report, there was no transparency around it, and B, I wanted it to be very clear to members of board and committee that we are monitoring and take risk monitoring seriously. The report presented is our first collective stab at this, so to speak. We've used a lot of guidance from our corporate colleagues. I've also used some of the way we present risks in the access pool to inform how this has been presented. The narrative with regard to how we're going to reflect when risk change is going in the future, that will be captured in if you go to page 149, and it's got more detail on risks. We'll report quarterly movements in those risks in the narrative there, and whether it's moved from amber to red or amber to green. Yes, the scoring of the risks, there is a lot of ambers and greens, and we have there's a lot of subjectivity to risks, but we've gone through a challenge process within the officer team and with consultants. Cyber risk is a very hard one to judge, so we've been talking to our third-party contractors, so for example the custodian, LPP, our administrator, about what security firewalls they have in place, what assurances, controls they have, and we'll be reporting more detail on cybercrime going forward in the future. So for the purpose of this board, it's a new report. We're inviting your comments on it, whether you like the layout of it, what you'd like to see change. It is about making risk more transparent to readers, such as board and committee, but also some of our stakeholders as well. And as Anne said, we'd like to invite comments and any suggestions as to how you'd want to see maybe this change in the future. That's all I was going to say, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I've got Mike Collier and then James Kidd. Mike?
Hi, yeah. Overall, I welcome this report. I think it's quite clearly laid out, but I do think, as Graham said, that a direction of travel would be welcome, so that we can actually see have things got better or worse over the time. The other thing is, I wonder, do we have access to risk registers from other funds? Are there risks that they have that we've missed? Are we very different in the way we assess any of our risks? Not that because we're different we're wrong, but at least it raises that question.
Thank you, Mike. I have done a review with another LGPS fund, and we have peer reviewed our risk registers. I'm pleased to note that a lot of our risks are consistent with their fund. They also use the LPP as a third-party administrator, and we were able to see whether our risks are also in line with what they have. So on that front, yes. There are some funds which we, at current, we have not seen their risk registers on their website. However, I would like to imagine that our fund actuary and our investment consultants have noted that they feel that the risks that we have are appropriate.
All right, and thank you very much. James, did you want to just come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to echo Mike, really, to say that I think it's a lot of a better layout and a lot easier to read. And echo again, I think Mike said it as well about a direction of travel. So yeah, just echoing thoughts, really. Okay,
thanks very much. Now, I see no other indications to speak or comment, so could I ask committee members to indicate it in the chat box. Once again, they're happy to note this report.
Thank you.
And thank you, Anne. Right, thank you very much, members. We move on to item 5, which is Local Government Pension Fund Administration Report. Now, this is going to be presented by, is it John Crowhurst?
Yes, that's correct, Chairman.
Very good morning to you and welcome. We'll take this report as read. If you can just start to give us the highlights, and then we can have a discussion.
Yep, thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. So this report covers the reporting period of Q1, which is April to June. Appreciate this is the first time that the board would have seen the new format. So I'm going to draw your attention to some key highlights. So first of all, our intention was to include all of the performance measures that we currently carry out on behalf of the County Council in one report. We are keen to include both quantitative and qualitative measures of the service. So lots of the information that we've presented in the report might not necessarily be contractual, but what our board are keen for us to do is measure what matters. So there is a section in the report that looks specifically at elapsed time cases, and we've focused particularly on retirements. So that's people that retire from deferred status or from active status. And what we've provided to the board in this initial report is an overview of the payments that are being made and the timeliness of those. So if we think about the concept of no break in a payment period, for an active member, the ideal scenario would be that they receive their last salary payment the last working day of the month that they retire. And then the following month, they receive their first pension payment. So what we've got in the report is an indication of how many, what percentage of those retirees actually do receive a pension payment within the first month. We have set ourselves a target of 50%, which you can see from the information that we're below that. There's a number of reasons why. In the background, Louise Sharman, who's the operations manager for Hertfordshire, and our management information team are looking at the data to try and understand why we haven't got the ability to make those payments within a month. And there's a number of factors. they can be things like how far in advance we were notified of somebody retiring from the employer, whether or not there was outstanding queries as we was moving through the retirement process. Obviously, we've got time that the member spends completing their retirement forms, and then we've got the LPP processing time. So what we'll be presenting to the board from Q2 is a breakdown of that information. And what our engagement team are looking to do is two things. We've got two strategies. One is aimed at employers and one is looking at our member comms, with the intention that we target campaigns to support employers with submitting information to us timely and accurately. And from a member perspective, obviously making the retirement process as easy as it possibly can be to follow. So we have recently recruited a head of engagement and communications, and I'm sure the board, and if officers are comfortable, maybe at the next meeting it might be worth Chris Dawson coming along and actually presenting our plan for member and engagement strategies and how we're planning to target those areas. So we've got those measures in the report. From the perspective of, well, what does good look like? That is a good question. Obviously, what we've got is 17 clients that we can do a peer review against. I can tell the board that typically from a local government scheme perspective, where we've got lots of participating employers, it does fluctuate as your chart shows, but it does hover around between 30 and 40% of retirees that receive their first pension payment within a month. For the fire schemes, it's a lot higher, and that's typically because it's one employer and one payroll. So the profile of the schemes is having an impact, but hopefully the board can see that we're starting to give some visibility around what we believe are the correct performance measures. And also, just to note, we've also recently participated in an external benchmarking exercise. Lots of large public sector schemes participate, including some large local government funds. So once we receive the results of that benchmarking exercise, we'll have some more information with regards to what good looks like. And obviously at the next board, I'm happy to present the results at a high level. Other things to know, just quickly, conscious of time, the help desk. So our help desk obviously is still remote working given the current situation. We have implemented a new telephony solution since people have been working from home. What that's enabled us to do is capture lots of useful management information with regards to why members are contacting us, whether or not the query was resolved at first point of contact, what processes we're receiving queries around, so that we can really start looking at how we can improve the new website that we will be launching during the second week of November. And you'll be pleased to hear, Chairman, that we have now got the call queue functionality, and so members are now aware of which position they are in the queue. I wasn't going to forget, Chairman. And the last thing I'll mention is the satisfaction survey. So we've got some results of our satisfaction surveys. The email and telephony satisfaction surveys in the report is satisfaction across all clients. It isn't currently client specific. I just want the board to note that. But from Q2, those results will be Hertfordshire County Council specific, and they'll be available in the Q2 report. So appreciate that was a whistle-stop tour of the paper, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to mute your mic. I just want to say, James, I saw your note in the chat column from the previous item. I'll ask officers just to respond to that, either through chat or email or something. Is that okay? And then we'll move on to questions and comments on this particular item. I've got Mike Collier first of all, followed by Tim Perkins.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I welcome the report. It's very clear and easy to follow. But I do want to pick up on this payments of pensions. You've highlighted it yourself, so it's obviously an area that, well, I'm putting words into your mouth, but you're uncomfortable with. I'm surprised that you've set yourselves the target. Does the county council, as overall administrators, not set you a target on this?
Thank you, Mike. At the moment, the benchmark, the target, we're still trying to find our way through what good looks like, which is why we've participated in this external benchmarking exercise. What we did internally, Mike, was we could benchmark the results across the clients that obviously we manage the pension service for, and 50% across the board looked like a reasonable target for the coming period, so this financial year. Because what's important to us is that we analyse the data so that we can understand what creates the delays. And there is a number of factors, some of which are within our control, some are not. But they're all things that we want to look at to see how we can improve the process. So, for example, we've now got an employer, for want of a better term, and apologies to the employer reps that are on the board, we've got an employer league table which just highlights the employers that maybe will want to get together in one forum to talk about how we can improve the information flow between the two parties. Obviously, from a member perspective, the majority of the delay is actually receiving retirement forms back from members, but there's a number of factors that could contribute to that, including people maybe seeking financial advice. They're all things that we're obviously not within our control, but through the satisfaction surveys that we're getting through, we're trying to understand how we can improve and make that process easier. And then thirdly, we've got the LPP processing time. So what we've found is that members who retire with an AVC typically take longer. So what we're doing with the AVC provider is trying to work out how we can improve that process to speed up our ability in being able to make the payment. So I think if we can work to pull all of those levers, we'll start to see a number of people retiring, receiving their first pension payment within a month. And the last thing I'll add, Mike, is people are not going without money. The lump sum payment is made a lot earlier than the first pension payment, because the first pension payment is typically made at the last working day of the month. So what we're going to include in the next report is to show how many people receive their lump sum within so many days of retirement. So you've got that context.
Okay. All right, Mike.
Yeah, that's fine. I would welcome the county council view on what's an appropriate target. I mean, appreciate that within LPP's sphere, you're saying this is a reasonable target. What about non-LPP? Are they any better, any worse, or where are we? But I don't expect an immediate response, but it's something I think needs looking at.
Well, I mean, just as a sort of comment, I mean, at the end of the day, in the old days, lots of paper had to be sent between various departments, etc., etc. It's all electronic these days, and it's not exactly a surprise when somebody retires for the most part. I don't suddenly sit down today and say I'm going to retire tomorrow. I mean, people plan this months in advance, so there's something about the way the process is kicked off, and so the ducks all ought to be in a row at the moment somebody actually retires, rather than this issue of wait time and all that kind of thing. But anyway, I'll move on to I've got Tim Perkins and then Graham Clay.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick point, going back to the minutes of the last meeting, it is something I've raised before, 5.5 in the minutes of the last meeting. It's support for vulnerable members, members with literacy and communication skills. Yes. I'm going to bang on about this one for a little bit because one of my employees who will be retiring next year falls into that category. I have also got another employee who falls into that category, who's just been hit with quite a pleasant bout of ill health, and we might well be talking about early retirement sometime soon. I know both of these employees struggle significantly with what I would call complex personal admin. They will find this process very difficult, and it's what the LPP and can be done to support vulnerable members with these literacy and communication skills. Perhaps there is something the employer needs to highlight. I don't know what the process is. I've been banging on about this because I can see a problem coming up, and I will come back to this one again.
I do remember you raising it last time. Yes. Anybody want to come in and respond to that?
Yes, Chairman, I'm happy to respond. So, Tim, you did. I do recall you raising that two meetings ago, and thank you for doing that. So, just to confirm to the board, we have got a vulnerable customer policy, which obviously highlights the things that we need to be considering. Something that we do offer, when people come to retirement, is they can contact our customer access advisors, who will talk them through the documentation that they've received. Obviously, in the current environment, it's difficult to do face-to-face meetings, but we were offering them if people did want to come into County Hall with the team that we've got there. We were happy to have face-to-face meetings. So at the moment, we would be happy to have a conversation remotely via Teams. I think obviously what we're aware of is that, you know, one approach doesn't fit for everyone's circumstances and personal needs. So that's why we give members the option of receiving things online or by post. The engagement team and the engagement manager are reviewing all of our letters. We've got a complete letter review going on at the moment, Tim, to make sure that they're as clear as they possibly can be, with the view that we attain a kite mark for removing jargon, making sure that everything that we use is plain English. So there's lots of things in train. What I'm happy to do for the next board is I'm happy to just produce an annex to the usual report that outlines all the things that we are doing, Tim. And then if you did want to have a conversation offline, I'm happy to do that as well.
That would be very useful. I think, Chairman, it might be helpful if we had sight of that vulnerable members policy. But thanks very much indeed for that. Much appreciated, John and Chairman. Thank you.
We can either bring that to a meeting or get it circulated. I've got Graham Clay next.
Thank you, Chairman. A number of comments, if I may, all around retirement processing. Experience elsewhere, most people get a large wad of paper and they put it in the too difficult box and don't read it. If, and I say if, you can give them information in small chunks, it's much more easy for them to digest it. Therefore, warning people that the retirement process will normally take 3 months, whatever the figure may be. I bow to LPP's experience on that, well in advance. So if you are thinking of retiring, do give your employer and us 3 months notice if you can. Then we should be able to get everything set up smoothly. That's one point. We are being critical. I would like to say that I'm delighted with the improvement in the service that's been given, and I don't want to get that one lost. On the development process, I think LPP are exploring what is feasible and trying to find out what the market benchmarks are. Ultimately, yes, I think it's for us to set the targets, not for them. But meanwhile, you can't set impossible targets. So an aside. The other one is not directly here, but it's connected with the process. Scams. We had earlier comments on cyber risks to us as a scheme. Cyber risks and other risks to our members should be an equally important part of the retirement process, in particular the retirement process, because people may feel they can use their cash. And this looks like a great investment opportunity, and I don't think any of us would be tempted. At least I hope not. So all things where I think a lot of guidance to our members, carefully spread over a lengthy period, could be very valuable. Thank you.
Okay, right, yeah. Now, Mike, you've got a query, but maybe later, is what you're saying?
Yes, it's McLeod related, but it depends. John, are you staying for later items, or are you going to disappear after this item?
I'm happy to stay. My colleague Neil Lewins, who's our technical manager and leading the McLeod work, is also present at the meeting, and he's happy to take questions on that.
Okay.
Okay, let's leave it till that item then.
Right, James.
Yes, thank you. Just a very quick one. In Annex 1, 2 of the employers are down as to be confirmed for their contributions. Presumably that means that it hasn't been resolved yet. Just wondering what the situation is with these employers. Is it still outstanding with those pension their contributions, their employer contributions, and what the situation is with that? And similarly, are they being tracked in the employer risk register, which was presented by Anne previously?
Hi, James. So they will be being tracked. With regards to the position on them as at today, I'm not sure. My colleague Louise Sharman should be on the line. Louise, do you have an update on those two? If not, I can respond to James later this afternoon.
I don't, but I can ask the team manager to get an update to you.
Okay, thanks. Apologies, James. We'll come back to you on that point.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, everybody. I don't see anybody else wishing to make a contribution on this item. Thank you very much once again for LPP and your continual efforts to improve service. We're asked once again to note the report. So if members can indicate in the chat box they're happy to note the report as before, please do so now. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. That looks like it's duly noted, and we'll move on to item 6, contribution deferral policy, which I think is Patrick. You're going to. Oh no, sorry. Is it no, Barry Dodds?
Derek, you're correct. I'll introduce it and then pass over to the scheme actuary.
Yeah. Okay.
And I believe the scheme actuary is today is Catherine McFadden, who she'll introduce herself when we get on to that part. So a brief summary. This paper is a policy that is a policy that's been developed with the actuary to manage employers who are experiencing financial difficulties in paying contributions to the fund. It's primarily been created because of COVID-19, but we feel that this is a policy that we could put in place for all situations where employers are struggling to pay contributions. Policy, as I said, has been developed by the actuary with officers, and it tries to ensure an equitable and transparent approach in managing employers. There is a limit to how long we can defer contributions for, and that is 12 months. They must be paid within 12 months as per LGPS regulations. That's the law, I'm afraid. And in the report that Catherine will present, it sets out some of the key fund and employer considerations. The recommendation is that the policy has been approved by the committee, but for the board to comment and note the policy.
All right, thank you very much, Patrick. It's over to you then, Catherine, is it?
It's actually Barry's going to be.
It is Barry.
I'm going to present this one.
Apologies, Barry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. In case you were expecting something looking a bit different,
well,
I'm going to be presenting this one.
But there we are.
Yeah, so I'll present this one. Catherine's presenting a couple of things later on, so you will get to see Catherine. Yeah, so Patrick's kind of outlined at a high level kind of what the policy is all about. I'll, in the interest of time, give you a kind of brief overview.
Just a brief overview.
Yeah, and then I'll take it as read, and you can ask questions about what you wish. So obviously, COVID has impacted many employers across the world. The fund at whole fund level hasn't been massively poorly impacted. You'll see there's a funding update later on, and the funding position isn't actually too different from what it was at the valuation date, based on the position at the end of June. So as a whole, the fund hasn't been massively impacted funding level wise, but obviously there's hundreds of employers kind of under the bonnet, if you like, that are all kind of potentially impacted by their own individual circumstances. So some of those will possibly be having some short-term cash flow issues. And the intention behind this policy is really to give the fund some flexibility to deal with employers where they're having short-term cash flow problems and can't afford the contributions in the short term, but do have a realistic possibility of being able to kind of afford them later on in the scheme year. Patrick noted that there is a kind of backstop whereby you have to report essentially late contributions to the pensions regulator if they're not made within the scheme year, essentially. So any payments that are in the rates and adjustment certificate to be paid by the end of 31st of March 2021, for instance, all have to be paid by that date. So you can defer. They're quite often paid on a monthly basis normally, but what you can do is defer some of those monthly contributions later on in that scheme year. So that's essentially what the policy is about. The reason there's a few points that are kind of key to know and important areas about the policy and how the fund should be treating this. The fund should be carrying out a kind of due diligence to make sure that employers have a realistic prospect of paying these contributions further down the line. So that involves kind of a bit of a covenant analysis. The fund should also be making sure that they're not kind of seen as a soft touch, that the other creditors of the employer are being kind of approached in a similar way. And any kind of guarantor for the employer that they have within the fund should also be consulted. There is a possibility of also the employer paying interest on any late payment of contributions, and that's something that the committee had a bit of a discussion about when we presented this last week, and I'll mention that in a minute. And one other important point is that the intention is that there's an initial maximum deferral period of 3 months, after which a kind of further review can be done as to whether any further deferral is allowed. So committee engaged pretty well on this topic last week, and there was a couple of items. One of them that Patrick's already mentioned, that they suggested that this policy shouldn't just be kind of COVID specific. It could be used by the fund going forward, because there's no real reason that it can't be used as a general policy. And also around the interest charges element, that the policy it doesn't currently in the draft that's in your packs, but it should specify explicitly what the policy on interest charges is. So we'll be revising it for those two elements shortly.
All right, Barry, thank you very much indeed. I think that covers it quite well. Okay, I'm open to any queries or comments, please, in the chat line. And we've got a recommendation that we note this once again and make any comments as appropriate. I see no one in the chat column wants to make any contributions, so can I just ask the committee, please, to note this item and this policy.
Sorry to intrude. I did try to make a comment, but it didn't seem to come through.
Right. Carry on. Go on.
Sorry, try not to be anonymous. I found the draft policy statement admirably concise and clear. I was a little worried by one or two of the words in it. For example, the last sentence on page 197, it should be noted that employee contributions should be remitted. My understanding is that they must be remitted. Similarly, may is, I think I saw a may where I would have put a should in, but it's not just definitive and authoritarian as I think it ought to be, given its statute.
Mays, musts and shoulds, Barry.
Yes, we can have a look at that and make sure that is that they are all appropriate. You're quite right, certainly on the employee contributions element. They must be paid on the monthly basis as usual, so there's no impact on employee contributions and them being paid over to the fund. So yes, we can certainly go through it and make sure that those are all appropriately assigned.
Okay, so
and if I may follow up on that, Chairman,
Yeah.
Some of the earlier bits of the paper referred to holidays and other such terminology. I'm not sure whether that was the council or the actuary doing that, but bringing the terminology in without defining it left me slightly muddled. I hesitate to think what it might do to other readers. It's somewhere, I think, in the council text, the officer's text at the beginning. But if someone could look at that, it's not really something to look at in the meeting.
Okay, we'll pick that up. Officers will pick that up. We'll get that minuted and picked up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you very much indeed. So, again, we pre-noted your contribution, but nevertheless, with that amendment and follow-up, I'm sure members will be happy to note the report. And I've got no other indication, so that looks good. Okay, thank you. Item 7, funding strategy statement, exit credit policy. Barry, is this you or Patrick going to start off? Who's doing this one?
I can start off, Chairman. This report is another policy that we've had to essentially change because of changing government regulations. The funding strategy statement, which you would have seen at your last meeting back in March and that you approved, contained a exit credit policy. We have had to revise that policy because of a change of government regulations. The old regulations required an administering authority, the fund, to pay out a exit credit to an employer where at the end of their contract they had more assets than liabilities. That was determined by the actuary. Under the new regulations that have been brought in, there is a lot more discretion given to the administering authority, the fund, to determine the value of that exit credit. And I'll let the actuary expand on some of the factors that are taken into consideration in working out how that value is arrived at. So I believe this one is going to be
Catherine. Hello,
Catherine, I think.
It is. Good morning, everybody. So, yep, as Patrick has introduced this is a change in regulations that we now have to reflect in the funding strategy statement. We've moved, this area has actually been subject of a significant amount of regulatory change. We started from the position that the fund was not permitted to refund any surplus to employers. There was no mechanism for doing that. So if an employer ended participation in the fund and it was assessed that they had more assets than the fund required to meet the liabilities, there was still no facility for an exit credit to be paid. Legislation was brought in which mandated that an exit credit was paid in those circumstances. And then this most recent round of legislation is really responding to some criticisms that have been raised on the original very definitive legislation, which didn't allow the fund to take into account any other arrangements that might have existed between an employer in the fund and, for example, an awarding authority who had awarded a contract to that employer. So some of the examples of situations that were being raised were where a body had joined the pension fund as a result of performing a service for a council, had tendered for the contract assuming that there was no facility for an exit credit, and also entered into some arrangements with the council where there was risk sharing arrangements in the event of a deficit, and those were already written into the contractual terms. The LGPS regulations as they were didn't allow for that to be taken into account, and so employers were entitled to the exit credit regardless of any other existing arrangements. The new legislation, as Patrick says, gives the fund the administering authority, a significant amount of discretion. And this policy is really about us setting out the processes that will be followed and the things that will be taken into account in exercising that discretion. The points that we are instructed to take into account are set out in the paper, and they include, first of all, fairly obviously, the size of the surplus or excess in the fund, and that should always form the upper bound of any amount paid out. It also allows us to take into account the proportion of any excess of assets which has arisen because of the value of the employer's contributions. And this is a more difficult one because the employer may well have participated in the fund for a very long period of time, but they may also have just participated for a very short period of time, and a surplus may exist because they've been very, I suppose, lucky, fortuitous in the timing of their participation, and there's been very strong asset outperformance during that period. So that gives us some discretion in deciding how much of that surplus really relates to the employer's participation in the fund. The other area that we can take into account is any existing contracts, particularly those made, particularly representations made as a result to the administering authority by the exiting employer or any other employer with whom that exiting employer has in the fund has a relationship. And then the final point is really just a catch-all, point D, which says any other factors. And the kinds of things that may well come into account there are regulations that were enforced when the contract was priced, any unpaid contributions, for example, and any other factors. So the policy really just sets out how the fund intends to take these items into account in assessing the amount of any exit credit to be paid in the event that there's a surplus when an employer exits.
All right, thank you very much, Catherine. Now, this, of course, is a policy that's going out for consultation with employers, is it not? So it's currently in draft form, and the board is being asked to agree that on the draft exit policy, and it goes to consultation. I think you've explained very well what the issues are. Any comment from any of the committee members? So if not, can we just once again note the content of this policy and the draft exit credit policy is circulated to employee bodies, and no doubt we'll hear the result of that in due course. So if we can just please in the chat column enter noted for the record. Thank you very much, members. Thank you, Catherine. Now, we're moving now on to item 8, which is the actuarial update on McLeod. We could spend all afternoon on this, couldn't we? So let's just try and do the headlines. Is this you, Catherine?
I think Patrick's going to introduce it first.
Yeah, just thank you, Chairman. Just a brief summary. This paper is more for information purposes of a change to benefits as a result of the Supreme Court judgment on a age discrimination case. The government lost their appeal to the Supreme Court and has decided to apply the judgment across all public sector pension schemes. The actuary's paper sets out some of the financial and administrative consequences of the judgment. From a fund perspective, the judgment will have a minimal impact financially of perhaps £5 million. However, from an administrative perspective, it's going to have a massive impact in that we're going to have to look at the benefits of members who were in the scheme at the time when this underpin was put in place. And we estimate that's about up to 25% of fund membership. The paper highlights that this is going to be a significant administrative burden on funds in correcting members' records with the underpin. And it's going to involve the engagement of a number of stakeholders, such as employers, payroll providers, in order for our administrator, LPP, to adjust the records. That's all I was going to say. The report recommendation is to note the content of the report. We're going to bring back some further updates over the next couple of meetings for you on this particular issue and how we're going to address it. But I was going to hand over to Catherine and ask her to give you some more background.
Okay, Catherine.
I can do that. I wasn't planning to go through all the detail of the legal action, so I'll just really come through. The purpose of this paper really was to give committee and board some insight, as Patrick said, into the implications of the ruling on the fund, and in particular the funding implications, but probably more significantly the administration implications. The government has now issued a consultation on the remedy, has set out what it thinks needs to happen in order to address the discrimination, and broadly that means applying an underpin, so being able to say to members who were present in the scheme on the 31st of March 2012, you will get the better of what you would have had in the old scheme or the new scheme for the period of service up to the 31st of March 2022. In terms of liabilities, it's difficult to value, so a single point estimate of the liabilities isn't maybe the most reliable, because so much depends on what happens to public sector pay between now and 2022, and actually also beyond that. So this number that Patrick's quoted, we estimate that it will be small, around 5 million, but that does depend on public sector pay over the next period. The more impactful piece immediately, and the other point I should say on that is, although at fund level it's quite a small number, again, because it very much depends on the pay progression of individual members, at individual employer level, that could be quite variable. So it could have quite a significant impact on some employers and virtually no, or indeed absolutely no impact on others. The administration impact is hugely significant. We've attempted to set out the steps in the document that the fund will have to work through. It's going to be a significant communication exercise with members. It's going to be quite complex for members to understand as well. It's not going to be straightforward. A lot of work will need to be done. As Patrick said, we estimate that up to 25% of members might be eligible for the underpin. It won't bite for the vast majority of them. The vast majority of them, their benefits will remain unchanged, but they will have the right to this protection. It may also impact their benefits in the future. So even though today it might not look as if the underpin impacts their benefits, if at the point the member reaches retirement, that can also change. So we will be dealing with the impact of McLeod right up until the last member who was present in the scheme, the 31st of March 2012, retires. So yeah, the steps that are needed are set there. There will be, for some members whose benefits are already in payment, there is the possibility that their benefit will change. It should only increase. There's no possibility that benefit will be reduced. And for those members, again, we'll have to be in touch, calculate arrears and interest, and pay the arrears. So yeah, I think that's about as
yeah. I mean, I understand the administrative overhead is huge. We could be spending thousands in order to award a member another £2 a year. I mean, that's probably an exaggeration, but you know, but yeah.
Not really.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. Be useful to see one or two on the basis of the consultation and how this is going to proceed. A couple of worked examples, actually, just as a matter of interest, really, because it's extremely complex, as you say, and no doubt we'll get further updates. Now, open to comment and questions from members.
While you're waiting on that, I can provide some example calculations of it, if that would be helpful to the board in understanding it.
It's interesting to see a worked example, really, you know, of the impact and how it works its way through to the individual. That's all. I mean, you know.
We can do that next time.
Yeah. Mike Collier.
Hi, yeah, this is my deferred question from earlier, if you like.
Yes.
I'm not sure whether it's the County Council or LPP that need to answer, but I just wondered what the thoughts are on how we're going to prioritise going through 25% of the membership. Are we going to do the older members first? Are we going to do those that have been in the scheme the longest? Or I just don't know. How are you going to prioritise it?
Catherine?
I can pick that up, and I don't know if the LPP wants to comment as well. I suspect what will happen in this is there will be a data gathering exercise first, so it'll probably be by employer to that extent, and that some employers will be able to provide some data, and for others it may be more complicated to provide the data, particularly if they've had a change of payroll system in the interim. There'll be a data collection phase, and then probably like most of these exercises, a kind of bulk processing bit where we can do the ones for whom we've collected the data. And then there will be the tail where there's complexity in it, and these ones maybe, rather than being churned through the system, will probably have to be updated much more on a manual calcs basis. And I'm thinking of cases where, for example, there's been aggregation of records and members might need to revisit that. So I think it will probably be more of that kind of approach, but LPP might be able to give you a more detailed answer.
Okay, I've got LPP coming in just a minute. Graham Clay has just said, any guess at the admin cost of all this?
I think that's one either for Patrick or possibly LPP.
Okay. All right. We'll move on to Neil. Happy to update for LPP, you're saying. So do you want to come in?
I can try. With as many caveats as we can throw sticks at. I think the first thing is, so much of this is going to rely on the systems being updated, and we're working with our system providers to make sure that they're able to pick up all the necessary information. And obviously, I do understand with the systems, there's a limit as to how much work they can do, while we're still at a consultation stage, just in case there are tweaks, amendments, not least because this is going to be one of the highest profile pensions consultations at any time. So I have got some sympathy as to how far they can commit to get some of the changes ready in advance. The good news is that when the care scheme came in, some authorities stopped collecting change of hours details for people who are not covered by underpin. Within the Hertfordshire Fund, we did carry on collecting change of hours and leave without pay details, which I think is a huge. I would love to say it was due to an inspired foresight from our point of view, but it was much more on the basis of we were dealing with so many different employers trying to explain the difference between staff who were covered by the original underpin and other staff. We felt it was better to carry on collecting all changes of hours, but that should put us in a better position to be able to compare care scheme with final salary scheme benefits for those people who are affected. But it is going to be a lot of work, and I think it will be. As always, it's as Catherine mentioned about the people with aggregation. It's going to be some of the finer points and people who've had divorce, pension sharing, and things like that. These are the sort of cases where it's going to be quite complex to make sure it's picking up the right details to make sure we're not. I mentioned divorce. We've got to make sure that the comparison isn't looking at one side with the divorce and one side without the divorce. And that sort of thing. That was pretty much.
All right, thanks very much, Neil. Thanks very much indeed. Anyone else want to make any contributions here? Because we're asked to just note this for the moment. Thank you, Catherine. Okay, I see no one else wishes to speak. So if we could just do the necessary, please. And for the record, note in the chat column that we're happy to accept this report.
Sorry, Chair, if I could just...
Oh, sorry, it didn't come up immediately, James. I'm sorry about that.
Not to worry at all. I just wanted to know from Neil, do you think that you will need any further information from employers, or is this something that you've got most of the information for already? Just wanted your take on that, please.
Okay. Again, with some caveats, but if the employers have informed us of the change of hours, if the change of hours has gone through, we have collected the appropriate pay for final salary benefits and for care benefits. So we have the pay information, and we would have the hours details. If for any reason employers have not given us the change of hours, despite the fact they should have been, and they would have been checked at the end of each year, that could mean that we'd need to go back. And the other issue would be, this is all based on the consultation as it stands. If something else is tweaked in the way between it being a consultation and becoming actual regulations, that could also impact, I suppose.
All right. Okay. Right. I think we've all noted the report now, and I'm sorry, James, your request didn't come up immediately in the chat box, and probably I was just a bit too quick. But thank you very much for everyone's contributions. We're now moving to item 9, which is Hertfordshire County Council Pension Fund investment in fossil fuels. Patrick, this is you, isn't it?
Yes, it's my reports, and this is a report more for sharing with board members. Details of a motion that went to County Council back in February with regard to the fund's investments in fossil fuels. The report that is contained as an appendix to the cover is the report that went to our Cabinet Resources and Performance Cabinet panel on the 4th of September, which provided the fund essentially an opportunity to explain to members of that panel and petitioners who are also present at the meeting how the fund's approach to responsible investment is evolving, and what the fund has set up a working group of cross-party members to develop a responsible investment plan. There's a lot of content in the report about how that group is working collectively with officers and consultants to develop that plan. There is also in the report some analysis, carbon footprint analysis of how the fund footprint looks compared to the benchmark, and the benchmark being the index, world index. And there's also a table 2.1 which shows the actual fund holdings in fossil fuel investments. So essentially a report is there for background information, but what I would like to make clear and what was discussed at that panel was that the fiduciary responsibility of this fund is to ensure that we have sufficient assets in the fund to pay current and future pensioners, and the onus will always be on the financial returns that our investments are giving. However, we do need to take into consideration whether some of those companies we invest in, still the investment thesis still stacks up for them, bearing in mind that we are now sort of moving to a green economy, and whether some of these companies such as your Shells are working towards developing solutions for a green economy. So that's all I was going to say on the report, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Questions and comments from members? Now, we're asked to note the contents of the report, and clearly this is a very challenging area. As Patrick said, the fiduciary responsibilities of the fund do need to be borne in mind. I'm slightly reminded of times gone by when there was moves to disinvest in other things we didn't like in the past. I seem to recall South African oranges came into it at one point. Slightly facetious, but we do have to take a sort of long-term measured view on all this, and it may be that this is a much more long-term issue than some of these other issues that have emerged in the past in terms of requests for disinvestment. It's quite interesting to see the way the industries are moving generally anyway in this area, particularly with recent announcements from BP and people like that. And I think the paper actually is quite a good and measured response in how we ought to react to these new circumstances. But I'm happy to take any further comment from anyone. Okay, I see no one wishes to speak, so can once again we indicate we're happy to note this report in the chat column, please. Right, that looks to be duly noted. All right, thank you very much. We move to item 10, which is access update. Patrick, that's you once again, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Chairman. Thank you. Again, I will take the report as read, but we'll give a quick canter through some of the summary highlights in the report. Members of the board will recollect that the Hertfordshire Fund is a member of the Access Pool with 10 other funds that are based in the southern England, south east and east of England. The Hertfordshire Fund has in the pool assets under access governance, governance totaling about 3.5 billion. Within funds that are managed by our operator Link, we have about 1.6 billion of assets. The other assets are in a passive management fund with UBS. There is as this report is at the end of June, I can report that we've invested a further 300 million into the access pool, and that was made at the end of August. Total assets in the access pool is just over 13 billion. All those funds are primarily equity and fixed income funds. The report section 10 talks about an insurance issue, but and briefly what that issue is that the operator Link is required to have a certain level of insurance in place under regulations for the assets under management, and Link have been struggling to gain the type of insurance we require at the credit ratings we specified in our legal agreements with them. This was discussed at a recent Access Joint Committee, and it was agreed that this could be relaxed because we had independent external advice from an insurance broker that said that this market had become more constrained, and it was right to relax that particular rating for insurers. There is also in the section 5 table 2, it summarises the savings from the investment or the pooling of investments to date for the Hertfordshire Fund. Circa 1.3 million per annum, and that's investment management savings. 5.9 talks about a tax issue. When we invested the long-term global growth fund with Baillie Gifford, we were given a proposal that set out significant tax savings of around £900,000. This proposal did not impact essentially our decision to invest because the management fee savings were substantial, and we would have invested this, but the outcome was that the tax savings didn't manifest themselves to be 900k. They actually are around just under 50,000 a year. You'll see a letter as Appendix A, which is Link's explanation of why they caveated that proposal, but it wasn't sold on that basis, and so fund officers are working with the Access colleagues to seek further explanations from Link on this particular piece. You'll see section 7, the Access budget. It's a small underspend to date. Section 8 sets out how the Access Support Unit, which is the officers and of the funds and a small unit of officers, how they've been operating during the pandemic. Section 9 sets out the Hertfordshire pool position, so you'll note that there's just under 70% of assets under pool governance. And section 11, which is about the operator Link. Some members of the board will have read in the national press, particularly in the broadsheets, that Link and their role in the winding up of the Woodford Fund has attracted some adverse publicity, and the potential class actions being brought by retail investors through litigation against Link. We are in dialogue with Link about this, but to be clear, the assets that they manage on our behalf are in a custodian managed by Northern Trust. Link essentially just give us reporting and enable us to invest and disinvest from funds. The impact for Access is obviously the adverse publicity that it attracts being associated with Link, particularly if they're going through litigation with a number of retail investors. That's all I was going to say on the report. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Okay, thank you. So it has been a successful exercise despite the somewhat underachievement on the tax savings.
Yes.
We were only making about 5% what we thought we were going to make. But anyway, that's fine. I mean, again, it wasn't sold on that basis, but and it has been a worthwhile exercise, and no doubt continue to be so ongoing. Open to questions and comments from members. All right, I see none indicated. So once again, we're asked to note this report. If you can indicate in the chat box you're happy to note the report, please now do so. Thank you very much. It looks to be duly noted. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. Item 11, the dates of the future meetings, as noted on the order paper, 3rd of December, 10 a.m, 11th of March, 2021, 10 a.m, 21st of July, 2021, 10 a.m, either electronic or otherwise, but I hope we're into the otherwise by at least next year, if not by December. But just to note the dates of those next meetings. There is no other part 1 business. So on that basis, I'll formally close part 1 and we'll move into part 2 for the part 2 items. So we're going to go into closed session to consider the items in part 2, which are exempt business. And I'd like to thank everyone viewing via the live web stream for their interest, and I hope you found it both informative and enjoyable. So that concludes the part 1 meeting, and we'll just now, in just a short while, go into closed session.